Hello and welcome. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Stephen Koza. Dr. Koza is a professor of psychiatry at the Uniformed Services University, where he serves as associate director at the Center for the Study of Traumatic Stress. He retired from the U.S. Army in 2006 after 25 years of military service. His professional interests have been in the areas of clinical and community response to trauma, as well as the impact of deployment, combat injury, and other issues on military service members and their families. And he was instrumental in organizing and executing the initial mental health response to the September 11th, 2001 attack on the Pentagon. And he has served Sesame Street as an advisor for a number of years, helping us create quality content for our military families, and most recently for all families who are facing challenges related to the COVID-19 pandemic, which is our topic for today's conversation. Dr. Koza, can I call you Steve?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you for sharing your time with us.
No, it's my pleasure. It's always a pleasure to be working with Sesame Workshop.
Wonderful. Well, I'm very excited to kind of pick your brain on all this stuff. It's a heavy world out there. So we're eager for some advice and for some counsel and for your thoughts on some of the resources that we've made for families and how they might be able to implement and use them in their own lives. Before we get started, I'd love for you to just tell us about yourself and a little bit about your work, maybe what your day-to-day looks like.
Sure. Well, again, thank you for the kind introduction. As you mentioned, I'm a retired Army psychiatrist, both adult and child medalist psychiatrist, and currently work at the Center for the Study of Traumatic Stress. And in that capacity, I work as a researcher, as an educator, and also as a clinician. So day to day, most of what I'm doing is I'm conducting research, some of it related to military families, others not, just on understanding the impact of stress and trauma and loss on families, including adults and children, and how we can best support them. And in that process, there's writing that's involved in education, not only professional education through manuscript and scientific paper development, but also through the development of fact sheets and webinars, as we're doing today, to provide information. Our center has actually produced quite a bit of information in support of families and communities related to the COVID-19 pandemic. But in addition, I'm a clinician, so I enjoy working with children, spending time with families, helping them with challenges that they come to me for, all in the hopes of improving their lives and helping kids and parents feel better in terms of managing with struggles that they may be having in their lives.
Fantastic. Well, it sounds like you are the perfect person to talk with right now. There's lots of stress, lots of trauma going on. And today we are going to talk about everyday challenges, and the topic of this webinar is called Everyday Challenges, Helping Families Thrive Through COVID-19 and Beyond. And I do want to provide a little bit of context for those who are joining us to make sure that they know that a whole suite of resources exists to help them cope with the changes and challenges resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. So these resources include what we like to call everyday challenge bundles, and each bundle has a short animation, an article for grown-ups, and an interactive game or an art maker activity to help families apply and practice the strategies that they might have seen in the animation or read in the article. So we began launching these bundles earlier this year, right at the start of this pandemic in the States, addressing topics like missing friends and feeling worried. We went into coping with sickness, understanding needs and wants. And then we've talked also about grief and the death of a loved one, especially not being able to say goodbye in a way that we might be used to saying goodbye. And so now, as some communities are starting to open up and go back to business, families are again facing new changes and challenges. And the most recent bundles that we've created and are creating reflect those changes. So for instance, we have Hooper's Store reopens. We have a bundle about feeling separation anxiety. And then finally, we're talking about reconnecting and respecting. So most of our conversations between Steve and I will focus on those final three topics and some of the other considerations that families might need to keep in their back pocket as they face these new changes. So that's the context of where these resources are. You can find them all on sesamestreetandcommunities.org on our health emergencies topic page. We actually have 2 subtopic pages coming for super families who are frontline families, specific resources for them. And then all of these everyday challenge bundles will be on a subtopic page as well if you want to work through them in a more systematic way. So Steve, I'd love to ask you first about the COVID-19 experience so far for families. What challenges have you seen and what has your experience been like?
Sure. Well, I think for most families in the United States, COVID-19 has really meant spending a whole lot more time together, especially for families that are living together, or it may be relocation of families to be together. So whether we're talking about young children who have been living with their parents in the home, or older children or young adults who've been in college, or were in their first job and there were disruptions in those experiences that moved back home. It was really a reconvening of family, sometimes in close quarters, and there were some great opportunities for families, I think, to be together, spend time together, enjoy each other. But also it can be a little close quarters can also mean that it's a time where families are spending more time together, and there can be conflict. There can be more difficulty in terms of sharing things. For family members who've come back into the family, it can be challenging because suddenly they may have different expectations about what their roles are in the family, especially for college students and young adults. And so I think the challenge for families has been, how do you maintain the structure, ensure that routines continue in ways that are good and healthy for all? How can you provide both family time and also private time so people get a little space when necessary? And I think the other real challenge for families has been all of the teleworking. So not only are families together, but and distance learning. So not only are families together and spending time together, but people are all sort of attempting, or many people are attempting to do their jobs as they typically would do, maybe taking on responsibilities as a teacher within the family and helping children with distance learning. So all of that can lead, again, to some both wonderful opportunities, but also challenges, conflicts. And I think that's what we've all been rolling with. Not to mention that for older children and teenagers, and for some younger children, the lack of social opportunities. So being together with friends, whether that's in preschool, school age, or teenagers in high school, doing their extracurricular activities, doing their athletics, and all of that can make for a challenging time, especially if socializing is one of the ways that kids can do that is spending a lot of time online, virtually playing games. And again, parents have varying rules and regulations and tolerance for that kind of behavior. So I think those have been the negotiations that we've all been dealing with.
Absolutely. That's very reflective of my own experience. I'm living with family, which is very different and beautiful, but it has its ups and downs. You mentioned privacy, quiet time. That's something that I really miss.
Absolutely. And the other thing too is extended family. I mean that, coming from a family that really enjoys spending time together and being together,
Yeah.
and traveling a few hours just to be together, not having that opportunity, not having the opportunity to be with older relatives who we might want to protect because of their age or because of medical vulnerabilities. So I think that can lead to some disappointment and a sense of loss as it relates to COVID-19 as well.
Absolutely. So you've talked a lot about some of the challenges and some of the opportunities there. Can you talk a little bit about why family dynamics are important, and the important role that parents can play specifically in helping their children face challenges?
Sure. Well, family dynamics more broadly, probably my appreciation, in addition to my professional life, comes from my own experience growing up in a big Italian family. And, and the times that we shared together, being together among siblings, being together with parents, bringing our woes back to home at night, sitting together and having dinner, and sharing those experiences in ways that I think the family is a place that we really can metabolize our experiences, being together with the people that we care about and love the most, knowing that we can let our hair down, share our vulnerabilities, learn from each other, tell stories, and maintain connections. So the power of families, in my mind, is just, we have many opportunities in life to grow through education and occupational activities and careers, but family brings a special strength, I think, to us as individuals, and that the dynamic, hopefully, is one in which there is mutual support, caring and understanding and mentoring. So whether it's in the immediate family or the broader family. But parents do have a unique role in that situation. So parents have the opportunity, especially in uncertain or stressful times, to model for children the ways of approaching the challenges that we're facing, especially like in a time like COVID-19. Parents, similar to their children, are, I think we're all somewhat concerned, somewhat distressed, some anxiety related to the uncertainties and the known elements of COVID-19 that affect us all. And so the way we manage with those, the way parents manage with our own responses to those experiences, are ways that we can model those experiences for our children. We do know that children in general, when it comes to stressful or traumatic circumstances, do as well as the adults in their lives. So the more we can, in fact, talk with children, explain things, help them understand, model and mentor, I think the better that our children will do. And then lastly, I think it's important to know as providers that that when we engage families, we have to have a respect that all families are a bit different. And we as providers bring expertise and knowledge and professional advice to the families that we work with, which is really the reason they come to us. Whether that be in a role as a clinician, whether it be as a role as an educator, as a child care worker, in any of the different roles that adults play in the lives of children, we bring that expertise to the family. And I think we want to ensure that what we bring is one that is respectful of the families, appreciates the differences among family members, recognizes their unique strengths and some of the challenges, so that we can be most helpful in terms of the way we provide our support and our professional assistance.
Absolutely. Can you give any concrete examples of either the modeling that parents can do and also that provider-parent relationship that you've mentioned?
Sure. I think that for parents, one of the most important things that we can do, especially with younger children, is to talk with them. So, a lot of times we're most concerned about scaring our children and talking with them about things that might be frightening. So if parents are hesitant, for example, to talk with children about COVID-19, then children are going to remain a little bit in the dark, or they'll get their information from other places. But if we share with them, share with children, if parents share with children information at a level that children can understand, that helps them understand what they are seeing in the world or what they're hearing about the world, then in many ways we can reflect to children that even though there might be scary things going on, there are ways of understanding it, and there are ways of mastering it that even children have the capacity to do, even being young and more vulnerable, that we as parents can frame those experiences in ways that make them manageable for our kids. So I think one of the most important things that we can do with children is to talk with them. We don't need to tell them too much information, but we want to ensure we tell them enough information. And again, my threshold is always help children understand what they are seeing and hearing. And I think if we use that as a guide, that becomes the guide at which we as parents can determine how much information they need to know.
That's really helpful. So in talking with a young child, maybe what if you don't know how much they know or what they're seeing or hearing? You know, if they've gone to a friend's house or if maybe the TV has been left on, how do you know and how do you get to a place where you can talk about what they know to
Mhm.
start from there?
Well, it's a good question. Sometimes they give us hints where they'll like say words or use a phrase that they must have heard from somewhere, and you realize that they have something on their minds that they're kind of letting you know about, and that can give an opportunity or an entree to talk with them and to say, oh, you heard COVID, or you use that, you heard that word. What do you understand about that word? And so we can then ask children questions about what they may understand or what they may know. So I think what they do know is something that they may share with us. The other thing is that we as parents may realize that they've been exposed to things that we probably need to talk with them about. So it may be that we're watching the news and something potentially upsetting comes on the news, and we look over and we see that our young child is staring at the television set while we're watching the news. And I always encourage parents, don't immediately and anxiously turn the television set off at that point, because that only further confirms to the child that something really scary and awful is going on. But to maybe gently sit by that child and maybe lower the volume or do something to direct their attention to you and begin talking with them about what it is that they saw and what questions that they have. And always reminding them, and some of this is going to depend upon the child and their age and their developmental level, but that you're always there to answer questions for them, that you are there to help them understand things, and that sometimes the world can feel scary, but as your mom or as your dad, I am here to help you figure things out and to explain things to you so you better understand and don't feel worried or scared about it.
That's helpful. In one of our previous conversations, you had mentioned, parents need to come to grips with their own fear. I wonder if that plays into this. And as you just modeled, it's okay to talk about how it's okay to be afraid, and sometimes things are scary. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. And then thanks for reminding me of that.
Yeah,
Because,
just came to mind.
um, uh, because I think the conversation that we had was about the fact that in order for us as parents or as adults, and this is true, I think, whether you're a parent, whether you're another adult in a child's life, whether you're a professional, what we want to have is a pretty clear understanding in our own minds of how we think and feel about what's going on, and have framed words for ourselves that we then are in a position to share. So it's very difficult to talk with a young child at a level they understand unless we have very thoughtfully understood what the issue is, and then we can frame it in the simple terms that a child can understand. So I think centering ourselves, kind of helping ourselves understand, okay, this is what I think and feel about this, this is what I want to communicate, is a first step in ensuring that we can find the right words to tell children.
That's a big ask. That's the real challenge, is to be grounded enough as a grown up with all that's going on to then, I feel like sometimes we miss that step. We want to fix everything right away, but we have to get kind of right with ourselves and understand where we're coming from and understand how we're able to navigate the world on our own, and then bring our children along with us.
Absolutely. And we also have to remember sometimes we feel like there's an urgency that
Mhm.
suddenly we have to communicate something. But, very often these are conversations that can take place over days or longer. For something like COVID, for example, that we've been experiencing for a long period of time. And as we're going to be talking about today, the transitions now between, okay, we really need to be safe and we can't go outside or we can't spend a lot of time with other people. And now we're saying it's more okay to do that or to do that under certain circumstances. This is an ongoing conversation that we have to have with children so that they understand that the circumstances may change, that what we've talked about previously was important then, and now maybe there's something new and different that's happening that we also need to be talking about. So it's an ongoing conversation. It's not just one. And if we remember that too, I think it frees us up a little bit uh, uh, to not feel like we have to have the right words at the exact moment at the right time. There is time to do it. And the other thing that I would encourage all of us to do is to seek consultations from other people. Talk to our moms, our dads, our brothers and sisters, others in our lives that we trust, and sort of say, hey, listen, I'm trying to figure out a way to talk about this. So I think we can center ourselves a little bit by reflecting our ideas and managing our own worries with other adults. So then we are more in a situation that we feel like we can use the right words with our own children.
It's comforting to hear. I want to share a little bit of a behind the scenes of creating these resources for COVID-19 because we felt like we were projecting into the future. These animations take a couple of months to develop. So the group of us who were working on these at Sesame Street were collectively some parents, a range of children in our families. And it was a lot of conversations like that. It was a lot of, well, what's it been like for you in your part of the country? For instance, I'm in the middle of America. Lots of people are on the East Coast in that organization. But as you said, people have traveled and people are relocating to be with family. So we had many different perspectives on sort of what the feel was like across the country, and also what those conversations were for different ages of our children. We had 4-year-olds, we had 5 and 6-year-olds represented. I have an 18-month-old, which, that's a whole different ball game. Just being calm within myself, my energy for him. So it was really interesting because we had to have some honest and some tough conversations. And a lot of times we were just sitting looking at each other like, I'm not sure how to say this, or I'm not sure what's the best approach to this. So it was a very thoughtful process. So I hope that comes through, and that these materials aren't reflective of all situations and all families, of course, but they were created with some real intentionality. I want to get us back on track a little bit. I don't want to leave providers out, because I would love if you could share just quickly some strategies for how providers can foster that working relationship with parents, especially if they might be using telehealth or different types of communication. What can providers do in this time to make sure that they're bolstering parents and families' strengths first?
Sure. Well, I think just the availability of providers, just being available to people, and, what we've been experiencing with COVID-19 mostly is this sense of disconnection. And if there is a silver lining in everything that has been going on, it's this developing kind of realization that there is some capacity in this whole virtual communication world where we can spend time together and we can do some things that we used to do face to face in ways that seems like it works pretty well. So to know for a provider to be available to parents in talking, letting them know and listening, I think is incredibly important. So just the availability itself. The idea of listening and understanding, and recognizing also that in that understanding, hearing stories about people's experiences that sort of outstrip my appreciation for what can be going on in people's lives in terms of, just while COVID is going on, people are living their lives, and there are other things that are happening, whether that's related to finances, whether that's related to employment, whether that is related to other illnesses, whether it's related to, relationships and challenges in relationships that are going on in life. So I think just listening rather than feeling obligated to necessarily feel like we have to tell people what it is that they need to be doing or tell them what to do. I think as professionals, we bring some expertise, but the first point of that is understanding what the circumstances are and the ways that we can be most helpful. But I think a lot of people have really felt like being able to be heard and listened to is very important. And then I think there's a lot of variability in need. So although I know Sesame focuses largely on younger children, children's educational needs and developmental needs, whether it was engagement in preschool or regular school, they were, and we're now trying to shift things to distance learning. I think for educators, again, the availability, the consistency, and trying to be helpful and available to parents as they provide information to children in ways that make sense is critically important. That parents are really feeling, I think, on the front lines of meeting all the developmental needs of their children right now. So what that means is they're not only moms and dads who were kind of with children in afternoons and evenings after they came home from school or preschool or daycare, but now they're doing all of that, and they're kind of given curricula that they're supposed to be, reviewing with their children. So I think as providers, having a certain level of empathy about that, and also providing as much opportunity as we can to share the information. And the other message that I felt is really important, and I've kind of sort of been saying loudly and clearly to people I work, is good enough is good enough. And so, many people are concerned about their children getting off track, that they're not getting what they need, that I'm not doing this great, that I can't do it as well as I need to be doing it for my child. And right now, good enough is good enough. That we really want to make sure that parents feel good about themselves, feel good about their relationships with their children, and we're not tasking them more. We're supporting them, and we're giving them what they need to feel like they can do the job that they need to do with their kids.
That's great. Thank you, Steve. Well, I think we're ready to dive into some of the resources that we've made, keeping all that we've just discussed in mind. I'm going to focus on the animations for these 3 challenge bundles, just because it's more fun to watch. It gives us something to talk about. But I will reemphasize that each animation comes also with an article that is for grown-ups specifically. It's not something that kids should be reading or co-reading. It's for grown-ups, and it offers strategies, maybe a deeper dive into what you've just watched, and then some ways to expand the strategy into the home. And then we've got some of these animations are paired with like an art maker activity or interactive games to help give an opportunity for parents to talk about what they've just watched and how this issue might be a reality in their own life, or talk about differences with other families. I think that's important too. So let's go ahead and take a look.
Hi, it's me, Alan from Sesame Street. Today we're going to hear another story about my favorite fairy friend, Abby. Look, says Abby's mom, Hooper store is open again.
Yay! I'm going to pick out my favorite snacks and give my friends a great big fairy hug. Can we go right now?
Well, we do need some things for the week, so yes, says Abby's mom. But Hooper store is doing things a little differently to keep everyone healthy. Do you want to practice new, safe, and fun ways to visit a store? Abby's mom says that first they'll need to wear their masks.
Oh, like when I wear my mask to play outside?
Yes, to help keep everyone healthy. Only a few people can be in the store at one time, so they'll need to be patient while they wait in line. They'll need to keep their hands to themselves and keep a safe distance from everyone else. About that far.
But how am I supposed to hug my friends when they're all the way over there?
For now, they'll need to try saying hello to friends in new ways. They can wave, self-hug, or...
Air 5! Yes! Don't worry, Mommy. I'll hold the flyer and make sure we follow all the rules.
Visit sesamestreet.org/caring for more.
All right, Steve, what do you think about this? What messages, strategies stand out to you?
Well, first, I'm always impressed how Sesame is able to distill such important messages in the work that you all do in helping children. And I think the first thing that I would just mention about this is the importance of using simple words and educating children about the changes that they're going to be seeing in their lives. That, you know, what they used to be able to do, that they're not necessarily going to be able to do in the same way. And even though there's some excitement about that, there are some restrictions that children are going to have to face. Providing some of the detail, just the detailed information about what we have to do in terms of using masks and staying certain number of feet apart, and then also the inability to hug. So the inability to physically touch each other. So I think the animation does a wonderful job in laying out all of those things in very clear and simple ways for children and for parents. And I think gives nice words for parents in terms of how to use those, to talk with their children about what it is that's coming. This whole idea of reopening is going to be, I think, such a challenge in many, many ways. It's really exciting in so many ways when people are, ready to get back and to be doing things that they were doing. And, I think after being home bound for months, it's just a chance to kind of get back to business as usual, but it can't be business as usual in the ways that we want. And so, I think even for adults, it can be challenging to limit ourselves in terms of what we choose to do or what we can do or what we think is safe or what's not safe. So figuring out for ourselves what it is that makes sense, and then finding ways to talk with children about it. But that also leads to a certain level of disappointment, and the disappointments that even came up in the animation having to do with the fact that we can't be in Hoopers the same way that we used to. We can't run in and do the things that we used to. We have to wear these masks now, which again, I think we need to talk about a little bit, because I think there's probably going to be a lot of variability in children's comfort in wearing masks, particularly for long periods of time, and how are we going to help them adjust to that. And then the idea of physical connection. So that children are physical and they relate in intimate and physical ways, hugging each other, touching adults. That's kind of what kids do. And right now, touch is something that we're not all comfortable with in terms of getting so close. This is a little girl in the animation who's actually pretty capable of managing herself, right? She can participate in these conversations. She understands, and she's able to, seemingly will be able to comply with those requirements. But many, many young children are going to have challenges with this. They're going to be impulsive. They're not going to know when to stop. And then how do we decide what are the circumstances that young children can enter where they can be safe, and that we don't have to worry about, them being able to manage circumstances that are just outside of their control. So some of this is going to be for parents to judge what the capacity of their young children is in dealing with situations that we put them in, and what they're capable of, and how long they can do it for, and under what circumstances. The mask specifically, I think that I think children are likely to vary, and I have to tell you, I haven't had a whole lot of experience with young children wearing masks. Maybe you have, Tara, but you know, the willingness to put on the mask, to keep it on. I mean, most of us don't like, you know, containment on our faces, and for young children that's probably even more the case. So the degree to which that they can manage that, but I think that there are ways that we can help them. Some of that has to do with practicing wearing masks, so and adding some play and fun into mask wearing, and you know, maybe making masks special by decorating them or putting stickers on them or doing things that help children invest in masks and wearing masks, as opposed to feeling like they need to rip them off, because that, I think, would be the natural tendency for most little people. You know, get this off my face. But I think that there are ways that we can kind of help children adjust to wearing masks, at least for certain periods of time. And I think I think providers' challenge is going to be, depending upon their engagement with young children, how are they going to help children manage that, especially in environments where children are expected to wear masks for longer periods of time. It just may be really, really challenging, and I think we need to be ready for that. And then the idea of touching, and I think there were some wonderful examples of, you know, whether that has to do with air high fives or self hugs, or using everybody has a stuffed animal, and when they want to show some you know, interpersonal connection, they can hug that stuffed animal, maybe while their friend is doing it, but that's also going to be a challenge. And the other distinction that we really want to make is to remind, or to communicate to children, that there are certain places where hugging and touching is totally permitted in our homes with our parents and our siblings. But when we go outside right now, we have to be more careful about that. The last thing I would say is that children are probably going to really vary in their comfort levels in leaving the house when we've told children for a period of time that it's not a safe thing to do, that we can't do that. And, you know, and I think this is true for adults, some adults are finding themselves much more ready to be more adventurous outside, and others find themselves spending time at home and being much more cautious and careful. So I think that's a human issue that you know, hopefully is informed by information that we're getting from reliable sources like the CDC, but still everybody's going to have their own sense of comfort. So, you know, I've heard stories of children who are afraid to leave the house now. You know, they're afraid to go out in the yard. And so what we really may have to do is to desensitize children to that anxiety. You know, our brains work in a way that fear is a response to risk situations, and you know, we can sensitize ourselves to fear, and then and this is true for children too. And then how do we desensitize? So it may be, you know, just stepping outside on the porch for 5 minutes, and then going out in the yard for a couple of minutes, or first watching mom and dad in the yard and becoming comfortable with that. And taking steps towards desensitization may be necessary for certain children who really have more of a difficulty in taking those steps now that we say it's okay to do more than we were doing before.
Do you have any suggestions or advice for when you are maybe put in a situation as a family where you felt comfortable, but then you can't really control? I think one of the things that I'm personally struggling with is you can't really control your environment or the people around you and what they're doing. And there's always just that lingering uncertainty in, well, what have they been doing? And you know, there's that, not to bring judgment into it, which we'll talk about later in the last episode about respecting differences, and you know, families each have their way of doing things. But when it comes to fear, do you have suggestions for how to manage or how to kind of let go of what you can't control?
Sure. Well, I think it depends on the circumstances. So maybe the first steps are to, you know, if it's a matter of having an outside distance play date with other children, it may be starting small and having a conversation with the other parents about what their understanding and expectations are. And I think as the adults that are supervising any situation with children, what's most important is to agree on what your rules are for how your kids are mutually going to engage with each other. So, so having those conversations up front are really important. I think that you're right. We can't predict everything that we may run into. So if we go to the park with another family and playing at safe distance from each other in the park, and then another child comes running up and suddenly wants to be involved, it's one of those difficult situations about how do you address that. And some of that is going to be a parent's own sense of safety and making a decision. But even in those circumstances, I would probably, if a child came into a park and started playing in that way, I would probably, I think it's reasonable for parents to ask the child to have their parent come over so we can talk before we start a play date together. And, we do need to feel comfortable that we all are going to have some differences in the way that we approach this. And what people consider, some families consider social distancing is very different than what other families consider social distancing, the kinds of exposures. So I think we have to be upfront with each other and also not be apologetic about the decisions we've made about our own safety, but getting the adults involved. And if adults are, sort of saying, well, I think most adults currently with their young children are concerned and careful and cautious. But if you find someone that, is unable to kind of share the conversation in a way that you feel comfortable, maybe it's not time to have a play date with that family yet. And so we may have to set limits on what we choose to do and with which people.
Yeah, those are difficult conversations to have, but I agree that it's easier to go into a situation sort of knowing the boundaries and knowing that you're all on the same page. It's just a difficult time. It is really difficult.
It is, and the unknowns. I agree with you. When you're in your house alone with your child, you can manage the environment much differently than if you do decide to go out and try something new. You may not have the same opportunity to control the environment as you would in your own home.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Steve. Let's move on to the next animation that we're going to watch. And this one is about separation anxiety.
Hi, it's me, Alan from Sesame Street. And today we're going to hear another story about my good friend, Elmo. Elmo's been learning and playing a lot with his daddy recently. And Elmo's daddy has also been working from home a lot too. It's been so much fun to have him around. But today, Elmo's daddy says that he'll need to start leaving the house again to go back to work.
But Elmo doesn't want Daddy to go back to work.
Elmo's daddy says that he understands. Going back to work is a big change, and being apart can sometimes make them feel sad or scared. But he has an idea. Elmo's daddy says that on the days he leaves to go to work, he'll draw something for Elmo, just the beginning of a picture. Then, says Elmo's daddy, throughout the day, Elmo can add to the picture. It'll be like they're coloring together.
Daddy will come back though, right?
Of course. Elmo's daddy says that at the end of each day, he'll come home and they'll draw and read and play together, just like they always do. Visit sesamestreet.org/caring for more.
That one was about separation anxiety. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, Elmo and Louie are favorites, so it's great to see them playing together and enjoying. And Elmo, his love for his daddy and his desire to be with him is so understandable. And I do think that, with all of the homebound work that many people have been doing and now going back to work, it can be confusing for young children because it sort of feels like, well, isn't this the way it is right now? Isn't this the way it's going to be? So how do we help children feel comfortable separating and reconnecting. And again, I think that it's going to be a challenge for some, and for others it may be less of a challenge. But what a wonderful example, a vignette here for, how a thoughtful parent sort of talks with a child about bridging that separation in a way that allows them to be together, but then separate, and while separated, stay connected by an activity that they both are doing, and then come back and revisit that activity again later. So some of this may require, again, a little bit of practice on the part of children, separating and spending time. Many children have wound up in their parents' beds again over the COVID period. And so even that can be a good first start, is trying to help children feel more comfortable being separated physically from parents. But these require sort of gentle approaches and step by step. It's not something that we need to rush into and figure out in one fell swoop, but to help children understand that there is a transition where they are going to be spending more time apart. And so I think, again, a great example. Some children are going to be going back to preschool, which in and of itself is going to be both an opportunity and a challenge. So for some children, the idea of being able to be back together with friends in preschool, even young, 3 or 4 year olds, that will be an exciting experience. And preschools and providers in preschools may need to make some be prepared for the fact that parents there may need to be a need for some parent lingering as we move into these first stages of children returning to daycare centers when that happens, or preschool programs. But the other idea that I think is really important, and some of this came from our work with military families, is the importance of helping children understand that while moms and dads are doing their jobs, that children have jobs to do too, just like adults do. And part of their job is growing up and learning and playing and doing things without moms and dads, and then having the opportunity to come back together and enjoy and talk about that and share those experiences. So dinner tables can be wonderful times for families to come together and to hear all about what's happened when people have been away, for parents to talk about their experiences at work, at least at a level that children would understand, and for children to talk about the experiences that they've had away from their parents, whether it's their home and away from a parent who's gone to work, or whether they're in a preschool or or a daycare center program where they're away and talking about the experiences that they've had. But an opportunity for roses and thorns, talking about the wonderful things that happen, but also the challenges. And I think it resets some of the more normative kinds of experiences that we had prior to COVID occurring, where children would naturally spend time away and then come together with their parents. And so this is where we want to move back to as it becomes reasonable from a safety perspective. And not to mention the fact that for moms and dads who've been with their young children, this is a separation for all of them, feeling comfortable again being away from their children when they've been together with them for a while. There may be some relief in that it's lots of work, and especially if they're trying to work at home while they're caring for their child, but also just a sense of loss that comes with that. So I think we should be prepared for lots of feelings, be understanding of those feelings, and gently move both adults and children in directions that allow them to be independent in ways that they can feel good about, and then come together as a family and celebrate those activities that they had independently, and share time together as a family later in the day.
I completely agree that there are many, many feelings. I have many feelings about being away. You know, for instance, I'm with my in-laws this week, which is wonderful. I get more time to focus on work, which I love. I love my work, but it gives me so much comfort to hear him running down the hall. And I do think that that transition for grown-ups will be difficult for many grown-ups. And so I appreciate you letting us know that it's okay to have all the feelings, and it's okay to be gentle with ourselves as we figure out what we're comfortable with as a family. I know, you know, in my experience, actually, some of our friends are concerned about going back to school, going back to those settings, and have enjoyed the time together. So now they're transitioning to a more homeschool-like environment, or sort of a hybrid. So there's lots of transitions, and I think that what you're pointing to is that this time has been an opportunity to learn about how our families are functioning. Probably brought to the surface some conflict, some things that we need to work on, but overall, I think it has its opportunities as well to spend so much time together and then figure out what we're comfortable with moving forward. And of course, there are families, and I'd love for you to address this as well. There are families who really don't have a lot of flexibility in this. You know, single parent homes, families who we're doing another series about substance abuse, and some of those issues really have been amplified during this time. So I didn't know if you had anything that you could offer to families who don't have as much maybe flexibility or support in the home.
Sure. I mean, I think those are challenging experiences for everyone, depending upon the circumstances. I mean, if there are financial situations, and you know, choice is a luxury in many ways under these circumstances, to decide what you want to do when you actually don't have a choice, or for that matter, when family members have been in the service community and have needed employment and have been going out to grocery stores or other places, or you know, healthcare centers or other places where they don't have the luxury from working at home. I mean, these situations have been much different, and sometimes the difference is finding the child care for your child whose child care center is now closed, and you know, you're trying to find out who may be able to care for your child when you have to go to work. So I think that's a really important observation. There are lots of different circumstances for different people. I think the example that you gave of substance use and people with, you know, maybe even broadening that, you know, people with pre-existing conditions, whether they be mental disorders or whether, you know, there have been more serious conflicts in families where, you know, the family has struggled with physical aggression in the family, and now everybody's at home together, and how to keep people safe. It really is the time, and although, again, we're talking today about transitioning out of that, I still think there's going to be more at-home time, and these are still real issues for people as we move forward. Seeking out assistance, understanding there are places to go to get help, and again, one of the I think from both personal and professional experience, I can say that that we've learned a lot about how telemental health can function even under circumstances where people can't get out, that there are ways of engaging people. There are programs that are available that are managing things with telehealth, whether they be directly in your community or they don't necessarily need to be, because if you're using virtual, you can get assistance maybe from places that are at great distance from you. So, and in that way might be an advantage to a family that's been in an underserved or rural area where there were not resources. So, but seeking out help, I think, is the important part, and giving oneself and one's family permission to not be doing okay, and to be willing to to ask for help from professionals who are available to provide that assistance, because we do recognize that this has been a stressful time. So those with mood disorders, depression, or anxiety, or there have been reports of concerns about potential increases in suicidality in the community. We really want to make sure people are seeking help when they need it. Thanks for bringing that up.
And thank you for letting people know that it's okay to ask for help and that there are resources available. We have a handful of resources that people can go to, hotlines and things like that are available and functioning right now. So, if you're in a situation, or if you know families who are having a tough time, please be brave and reach out to them for help and let them know that you're there for them to at least talk, like we mentioned in the very beginning of this webinar.
Another resource that people may or may not be aware of, but there is a national disaster hotline that people can access, and they've the access to that hotline during COVID has been many more people calling, and they are there exactly for this purpose, and hopefully in a position to guide people to resources that would be most useful to them.
Thank you. All right, well, let's move on to our final bundle. And we talked about a little bit of this in our previous conversation so far, but this one is a doozy. This one is very hard to create. Again, we were sort of predicting the future, what the situation might look like and what some of the perspectives might be. So we tried our best, and there are many stories to tell. And I think the underlying goal here is that what you said about listening. There are many stories, there are many situations. People have been continuing to live their lives through this pandemic, and our lives all look different. So hopefully this animation highlights understanding, just understanding where people are coming from, and that it's okay that we're doing some things differently.
Hi, it's me, Alan from Sesame Street, and today we're going to hear another story about my friends Elmo, Abby, and Rosita. Today, Abby, Elmo, and Rosita are having a social distance picnic. Elmo and his mommy are sitting over here, Abby and her mommy are sitting over there, and Rosita and her abuela are sitting in their living room.
Rosita! Why couldn't you come to the park with us today?
Rosita explains that some of her family members have needed to keep working.
Does that mean that Rosita's family hasn't been following the rule to stay inside?
Well, not quite, Elmo, says Abby's mom. Some of Rosita's family are helpers.
See? Yes! Some of my family help deliver groceries from the grocery store. Oh, you have helpers in your family? Cool! They're pretty great. And because they're helping, it means we have to be extra careful to make sure our friends and family stay healthy. My abuela says that even though some things are opening up, we'll need to stay inside for a little longer. Rosita will be at the next picnic, right, Mommy?
Abby's mom explains that Rosita will be able to play with them whenever her family is ready, whenever they feel comfortable. For now, they'll keep wearing their masks, staying apart, and having fun picnics.
Oh, amigos, now let's eat. I am so hungry.
Visit sesamestreet.org/caring for more.
All right. What did you think of this social distance picnic, Steve?
Well, another great piece of work by Sesame. The idea of finding ways of being together in ways that we can be together, where people feel comfortable, and joining in ways that make sense for them as a family is so important. So here we have examples of good social distancing, masking in the park, and and a video chat simultaneously. So but finding ways of connecting, which is just so important. I think the message is clear. We want to be together. We want to physically distance, but we actually don't want to social distance. We want to socially engage while we're staying safe. But there are going to be lots and lots of differences and different experiences, different circumstances for families that need to be understood. Some of that is going to have to do with the levels of comfort that we were talking about earlier between families in terms of what one family is willing to do versus what another one will do. But some of it is going to be about specific circumstances that families are in. So for some families, if they live in situations where, they have a vulnerable family member, whether it's an older family member or someone with medical difficulty, they're going to be less likely to feel comfortable connecting with people, even in a circumstance that many others would say, this is pretty safe, like being in the park and 6 feet apart. Some families are going to say, no, I just don't feel comfortable with that. Other families, it might have to do with the fact that they themselves feel like that there may be vulnerability in the family because, say, it's a healthcare worker family, and they have concerns about what have we been exposed to, and what am I going to share with the community? What do we feel comfortable doing, as opposed to being worried about being infected ourselves? And some of it is going to be purely just based upon a sense of safety. So this idea of respect, and Sesame always communicates respect, I think, in such gentle and clear ways among the characters in your stories, unlike most television cartoons where people are hitting each other over the heads, and Sesame is, communicates this gentle, caring, good friend, understanding, respect, and empathy that is just such an important message. And given the lives that we all are living now in a society where there can be a lot of judgment coming from lots and lots of directions, that identifying this message of recognizing there are no absolute rights and wrongs about the way we do this, and people are going to be doing things that make sense. We do want people to be educated in the choices that they make. We want them to access good information and to base their decisions on what they do in their families. But ultimately, we don't want to judge what others choose to do. And hopefully what we can do is to find out, and so we've had some conversations personally about this with other families. It's like, do you feel comfortable doing this? Do you feel comfortable getting together here? And then hearing, no, we don't feel comfortable doing that, but we would feel comfortable doing a Zoom call with you, and just, can we get together on Friday night? And so negotiating, the agreements on in what ways we can be together. But ultimately, that's the goal. But respecting the fact that there are lots and lots of differences, some of which some families may not feel comfortable sharing, so they may not tell you the reasons why they need to be a little bit more careful about the way they approach this reopening. If we judge those decisions, I think we actually disserve ourselves as well as those people, as well as the relationship. So again, I think a great example of coming together in ways that everybody feels good about.
I also wanted to ask you about the kids' questions. So both Abby started the whole conversation, why can't you come to the park with us? And Rosita, of course, is very confident. She's able to speak in a gentle way. All these characters are very adept. But Elmo does ask a tough question. Have you not been following the rules? Which is something that I think as grown-ups we are prone to look at others and point out what others are doing or not doing, and it makes us feel comfortable. And of course, Maggie steps in and she says, "Oh no, that's not quite how it works. There's lots of nuance to the situation." Do you have any advice for grown-ups when they get hit with a tough question like this, a very pointed question that might have an edge to it, and how we can soften both the answer and our own selves to
Sure.
others.
When it comes from a child or comes from an adult or comes from either?
Let's do both. Let's do both.
Well, I think in coming from a child in a situation like this, that Maggie's response was one in which helped Elmo understand that it's a nuanced situation, that it's not just, first of all, that what are the rules exactly, and that all families, I do think it's important for families to have rules. That's a way that we can all, within our own families, have some agreement about the way we're going to be living and what we're going to be doing. But those rules don't apply across families. So, if we talk about rules, I think we also want to understand, what are your rules? And let me tell you about my rules. And so there can be some mutual understanding about that. And in that circumstance, it wasn't about the rules at all. It was really more about a specific situation, and that's what the clarification was about. I do think that, I think it depends upon the relationship, and adults are free to speak in whatever ways they want. Hopefully, with the intent of maintaining the relationships of the people that they're connected to. But what I would say is that finding respectful ways of understanding that there are multiple ways of approaching this, and there can be times when adults may feel comfortable sharing some personal information that might help better contextualize the decisions that they made. Or sometimes it may just be a simple, I know you're choosing to do things differently, but these are the rules that we put in place in our house, and we appreciate you respecting them. I mean, it's not getting into an argument. It's just being clear about the fact that you have your set of rules, and I understand that, and we have our own. And then I think always the important thing, getting back to that idea, but given that, is there a way that we can all feel comfortable finding a way to be together? If that's really what the goal is, if the goal is spending time together, how can we do that in a way that makes the most sense? And as the world opens up more, I mean, we're seeing differences really geographically right now in terms of how communities are managing. We're seeing differences across extended families in terms of how different family members are managing with things. And I do think that that what is important, especially again with kind of higher level judgment that's going on with overtones that are really not related to safety, but are related potentially to taking sides in a discussion about what's right and wrong about this, to put things back into the context of individual choice and individual family choice, and that we all make choices based upon what we think is best for our own family. It kind of speaks to the kinds of judgments that can take place when you're talking about child rearing and parenting strategies, that where we can get unwanted or unexpected feedback about what the decisions we make about disciplining our own children from other people. And hopefully most people respect the fact that parents are in charge of their children, and parents are also in charge of the rules of the house. The more I think we can respect others and others respect us, the easier this is going to go. But I don't think that these are unreasonable concerns, because I think that the more that things open up, the more likely it is that there could be disagreements about how different people approach these issues.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I want to move on to our last point. We are running out of time. And I know that you've worked with families in very difficult situations. So I wondered if you could speak to what resilience looks like in families. So right now, the challenges are seemingly endless. We had challenges before COVID-19, we had lives going on that were sometimes very difficult in big and small ways. But now, because of COVID, people are unemployed, potentially facing food insecurity and home instability. And on top of that, we do have this community grief and renewed energy to combat racial injustice and figuring out how to talk about and work through really deep issues in our country. And it is quite a load for especially the grown-ups, for parents in kids' lives. We're carrying a lot of weight, and maybe you could leave us with just some advice for how families continue to press on through all of this, and maybe what those thriving families really look like in your experience.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I think the first thing to do is always to recognize and honor the challenges and the varying challenges that families face. So I think, as you nicely summarized, Tara, that all families are dealing with COVID-19, but that some families are dealing with it in ways that are much, much more challenging, especially if we're talking about things like unemployment and food insecurity or mental or physical disorders or loss, death in families. I mean, those are circumstances that I want to contextualize my comments about resilience, even though I think people can be resilient in those circumstances. I don't want to be Pollyannish about thinking about the real difficulties that people have. But on the other hand, I do think this idea that we can move forward in ways and that we find successes. So I do, I know there's always a lot of emphasis in conversation, in the media, social media, about what we're not getting right. But there is also there is a lot that is getting right. I mean, I've always been, or I've been impressed over the last few months, although I know things have shifted more recently, just how this country was able to make the changes that we did and move into this social distancing posture for the purposes of mitigating this virus. And, based upon at least the way the numbers had been moving. I know there's more concern recently that there may be some hotspot areas that, I think that we should feel proud of what we've done. I think that people feel good about some of the efforts that were made and the work that was accomplished. Was it perfect? No, but I think we want to recognize and value our successes in this, because if we put them in the trash can, then I think it really is hard to be resilient. This gets back to this idea. It's not about being perfect. It's about being good enough. And our goal is to move forward in ways that allows us to grow as individuals, as families, to support our children in their growth, and potentially to grow as a country, all of which is, and communities, all of which, has its set of challenges and opportunities associated with it. But what I would say is that families with children specifically, when we think about resilience, I think it's that staying connected together, being together, maintaining a positive attitude about the experiences, not being Pollyanna-ish, and recognizing that it is a tough time, but we're moving forward with it. And there may be challenges as we move forward. People discuss this potential of a second wave of COVID and what that would be like. And I think we all shaken our boots a little bit about wondering what that might do if there is in fact such a second wave, and how it would affect us all, especially after what we've been through this spring. But that we have accomplished a lot. We have faced the challenge that's been associated with COVID, that we're moving forward, and communicating that to children. And I think we do need to honor the disappointments and the loss. There's been a lot of loss associated with this. It's loss of being together, sometimes real loss, like losses of jobs, losses of finances, losses of homes, losses of lives. Those are real. We need to pay tribute to those losses and reflect on the disappointments associated with this, but that we still have opportunities to move forward, that there are things to look forward to, that we have the capacity. This has always struck me as an important cultural strength within military family communities, that we can get through this together. We can manage with the challenges that we're faced. It's tough, but we are strong. And I think there is a mentality that parents can bring to a family, that we need to frame things for young children. We need to frame the fact that, of course, it's hard. Of course, you miss seeing someone. Of course, you miss going to school. Of course, we miss being outside and spending time with our friends, or more significant losses that have been faced. But we are strong and we can move forward with this together. And that's framing our perspective. And parents are in a unique position to do that with children while still being empathic. It's not a be tough and suck it up. It's of course, it's all true. It's true, it's sad, it's hard, and we can do it. It's communicating both of those issues that I think help us be resilient. And then connecting and leaning on others, being together with others, drawing strength from others, asking for help when we need it. I always reinforce the fact that it's not that strong families don't have problems. It's that strong families face their problems, that we seek out, we understand, we try to problem solve, and we ask for the help that we need. And that's a tough thing to do. It's not easy to ask for help, but sometimes that's what we need to do. And that is being resilient. Being resilient doesn't mean being self-reliant all the time. It means doing what you need to move forward for yourself and your family.
Thank you, Steve. Well, I don't have anything to add. I'm tearing up a little bit just thinking about my own experience during this time as a military family, and just thinking about some families who are going through, particularly difficult times because of this, and also just, what's happening in our country. So many people are grieving. I just appreciate you calling to mind that we are strong and we are capable of getting through all these challenges related to COVID and otherwise. And I just appreciate you encouraging all families watching, all providers watching, that, there are things that we can do to help each other and to lift each other up, and that we are capable. Do you have anything else to add, Steve?
I think we need to be kind to others, but we need to be kind to ourselves. And this is true for parents, and it's true for providers too. But providers need to take care of themselves. We all need to reflect on what we're attempting to do, gain a sense of satisfaction about what we do, and value what we do. So, I think kindness would go a long way, both self-directed and directed towards others at this point in time. So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Koza, Steve, for joining us today. We will be linking to some of the resources we mentioned in the webinar today, and including some of those hotlines that we mentioned. And of course, all of these Everyday Challenge bundles will be available on Sesame Street and Communities. You can send us an email at any time or find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We'd love to have you join our community, and we appreciate all of you for getting through this tough time. Please know that we're in it together with you, and that we care, and that we really do want to create resources that support your family directly, or the families and communities that you serve as a provider. So thank you so much.